Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Naomi. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, obviously, this episode had a very interesting duo I wasn't expecting, and that's Dee and Zimbardo. And I think that's so interesting because it does beg the question, like, despite all that he's kind of heard about Zimbardo when it comes to, like, Naomi's talking about him, like, you would think Dee, who kind of acts as her protector, would have confronted him way before now. But it seems like this is their first time talking at all. But it does also seem like they have history, which Dee hasn't really talked about, to the point he knows enough about Zimbardo, because he's like, oh, and you call yourself royalty, because they're both, because he had actually commented on, I want to say the previous episode, where he talked about how basically there are certain planets that are kind of higher on the totem pole than others are, and Earth isn't really on that. And I wonder, is it specifically this Earth, or is it other Earths? Because I guess, once again, considering all the heroes that exist on Earth in the DC universe, but to be fair, it doesn't seem like there's many of them that exist on this one, so maybe that plays into that, but he made it seem like Earth was kind of like on a lower tier of planets in the like galactic sense. So they're both wondering, like, why are they here? Because it's like, right, you're a Thanagarian, like, can't you go anywhere? Like, there's plenty, like, thousands of other planets in this galaxy. But he'd also turn it back. He's like, right, you're a prince. I'm not a prince, but you're royalty, apparently. So why would you slump down here on Earth? Like, he's got his reasons just like Dee does. But he also kind of talks about Dee being kind of a war criminal. Also leaning into, like, the Thanagarians being this kind of almost like warmongering species of like, yeah, you're kind of peacekeepers, but that's like, I guess it's like they kind of go to planets like, oh, like if you don't fall in line with what we want, which I do vaguely remember that kind of being a storyline from Justice League, if I'm not mistaken, like, because I think Hawk Girl was like torn between like Earth and her people. I mean, because there's also like the whole John and her thing plus Hawkman, like there was a bit of a love triangle thing there, if I remember correctly. But I want to say they did get to the point that they were like bad guys for a little bit, the Thanagarians. I don't know if that's typically what their story is. I don't know if I'm misremembering that, but that is kind of interesting knowing like, oh, they're kind of war hungry or something like that, and they'll justify by being like, oh, we're peacekeepers. So I don't know whether it's a thing of like, yeah, we dictate how peace is going to be kept, so like we beat down anyone to kind of force them into submission so that there's no issues, whatever the case may be. It seems like Dee's on the run. That's probably another reason why he doesn't really go back home. He talked about, obviously his love, but other than that, it's like, maybe they're both on the run because of that. Maybe they're both kind of war criminals from their people. So, because he had hinted like, oh, like the bounty hunter has like a list of people. Naomi might not be the only one up there, because I love that Dee was like, we're going to work together because that bounty hunter has certain information neither one of us wants getting out. So Dee's circumstances probably like, I don't know whether it's correlating to like, oh, Naomi. I think it was more so like, no, we don't want certain people he could go off running his mouth to find out about where we are. He could put word out there and more people can be coming after either one of us. He's only here for Naomi. He doesn't know about Zimbardo. I don't know if he knows about the others like Akira and them. But at the very least, he's after, he's only after Naomi, so he doesn't care about, isn't even aware of them. So obviously Dee isn't too keen on the idea of killing him, because Zimbardo kind of makes it seem like that's the best option. And so they confront him, end up getting his list. Apparently he gave him to Adam Blake to like throw into the Phantom Zone. So I'm like, which I did some quick Googling. He's a character named, Captain Comet? Apparently he's like a mutant or something. This is something I just like quickly did the smallest Googling, because I'm about to say like, what's his connection like to be able to have access to a Phantom Zone or something like that? Like, apparently, like, at least what some of his alliances, he's a reserve member of the Justice League. Once again, he's an older character from like the 50s, so I don't know if he's typically in rotation in the more recent continuity stuff. Like I said, I did the smallest like Google search and stuff like that, because I was like, for you to have access to a Phantom Zone, I'm like, you have to have some connection to Superman, but I'm sure the Justice League has like, so once again, it's like, who exists in this continuity, or is it just because we know Superman exists in this continuity, so maybe he just got it from Superman. Maybe there is no Justice League, considering there's not that many heroes, but it's not just Superman, so I guess it's just a secret subsect of maybe alien-based superheroes that exist, or maybe a lot of superheroes are just kind of kept quiet. I mean, I think even if you looked at it to a certain extent, like based on the way they kind of set Wonder Woman up, she's kind of been like a figure in the shadows. Like, she's never been like the public figure. She kind of has, she kind of flew into the kind of more the public appearance like after World War One. I mean, I always get the dates confused. One, because Captain America takes place in World War Two. Her story took place in tangents and all that aside. I'm just so curious, like, what heroes exist in this continuity. It'll probably be like those like names that are like, unless you're a comic book, if you're a DC like nerd like big time, you'll know, but if you're like your casual nerd like myself, I'm a pretty nerdy dude, but I think I'm just like, when it comes to the comics, I'm the surface level nerd. I'm not as they refer to them as sweaties, like, so probably like there's going to be a lot of names that probably get dropped. I'm like, I don't know who the hell that is, but still. Regardless, I just kind of got caught up on that. I was like, oh, that's how you got rid of them. Interesting. But it turns out one of the names on the list, like I brought up earlier, is the woman that Q that he's looking for. So once again, is she accused of the same crimes? If at the very least that means she is somewhere on this planet. If one of the, because I'm assuming like all the bounty hunters are probably allocated to a planet. It's like, cool, find these people on this particular planet. So maybe it wasn't just Naomi he was looking for on this planet. Maybe she's up here too. So Zimbardo made it seem like that was the only name of interest that would interest him. So maybe no one else of note, but that is kind of interesting considering like Q went back home looking for her and he doesn't know where she is. So for her to end up on the same planet, and it's like, if she is here, why hasn't she come looking for him? Not unless it's a thing of there's a memory loss situation going on there and she doesn't remember him or know her true nature. I don't know. Or maybe there's other reasons why she potentially might have stayed away. We'll have to wait and see. So there's that side of things. There's also the situation with Naomi's parents who find themselves drawn even deeper into this because her dad has to pretend like, oh, honey, I didn't. I found out about aliens. Now you know the truth, because she's kind of being brought into the fold because as a linguist, she's supposed to translate the stone that Naomi was found on. They found it, which I think a lot of stuff stacked up, against them, because it's like, right, it was found in the area that he went off on his own when he was like, oh yeah, when stuff was going down, like, was it last episode or episode before last? It's like, he went alone, and it's like, oh, why did you do that? He was like, oh, I was just surveying the area, didn't find anything. It's like, they found it in an area where he claimed nothing was kind of there. Like, all right, we'll leave it at that. Then all of a sudden, there's a suspicious angle of them going into the lab where they're analyzing the stone because they can't have it be found out that it's anything alien, because, it's like, oh, we can mistranslate. It's like, yeah, but if we mistranslate it, that's just going to make us look more suspicious, because it's going to make it seem like, oh, like, how did you get this wrong? Like, obviously this is clearly alien, and, and eventually they would translate it themselves anyway, figure it out. So they're kind of given very few options. And Naomi's mom suggests, why don't we run? But it's like, we did it before. So I'm like, interesting. So there's always been this inkling that there's still more that her parents are hiding from her. So I guess maybe there was a situation in the past where maybe her powers displayed, or at the very least, people started asking questions, and so they had to leave. So maybe this, maybe like the bouncing all around wasn't 100% about, military stuff. It might have actually been about protecting Naomi. They've kept secrets before and they made it seem like everything's above board, but for them to be like, oh, we gotta run again, makes it seem like there's stuff they aren't telling her. But they're willing to do whatever it takes to protect their daughter. So they changed some evidence, lied about like, oh, this is some like ancient human language, it's not alien. But the commanding officer dude like knows they're lying because there was supposed to not be a security camera, I think, even in that hallway, but it was. There's nothing inside the room because I'm sure all that's like confidential and stuff, so you don't want any record of it. But for them to go into the room is super suspicious. It's just stacking on, and so it's like he's looking into them. So in their attempt to not draw too much attention to themselves, to keep things away from Naomi, it just put a bigger target on their respective backs. So we'll see how that plays out. But also, like I said, finding out more about their past. Because we got like that little inkling about how they met, how they found Naomi. But even then, there's still so much story there that we don't know. There's also the 16 years of like unsure what happened in that time frame with Naomi that maybe they still haven't told her yet. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. But obviously on the Naomi front herself, she's struggling in the aftermath with the bounty hunter because for the first time she's been like truly and wholeheartedly afraid, because even when she's meditating, all she can do is see him, the bounty hunter, coming towards her, because she couldn't do anything. And what scares her, it's like in that moment I couldn't use my powers because she thought she had such good control over it, and when the time came she'd be able to defend herself, and in that moment she couldn't. And it's like if D, like in her head she plays it over and over again, like a what if of like, what if D didn't show up when he did, like things would have definitely played out differently. So she wants to get away from everything for a while, like from the training and, just get to be just a normal teenager again. But even Annabelle being like, yeah, this is probably not going to be the easiest thing. Like, sadly, no matter where Naomi goes, like I think she's always going to be drawn to this in some shape or form. But also, you can't escape who you are. Yeah, you were kind of raised as a human, but this is part of who you are, and it's always going to find its way to you. Like I said, or you find your way to it. But basically, the whole thing is him going to like this camping thing, and like you see the way Anthony's looking at her, and it's like, oh, that's going to be complicated. I'm like, oh, he doesn't know about the Nathan thing, which we later on found out, oh, he does know about Nathan. And he's like, yeah, it's high school, so word got out about you guys kissing, and it's like, yeah, I've always knew you guys were a thing. It was yeah, they broke up, but there was always still that kind of like middling ground of like there's still something there. Well, there was also still something between her and Lourdes, and something between her and Anthony. But obviously, like, the spending time together and getting to talk didn't play out the way they thought it would. They were hoping it would. Especially for Nathan, because he has questions. Because we get a little peek at the beginning of the episode into them dating 7 months ago. Kind of like their first date and everything. But he never got actual resolve on, like, or closure on, like, why did we break up in the first place? Like, you just randomly broke up with me, and he's kind of scared because he's like, right, like, you never gave me an answer to that. Like, how do I know, like, the same thing is going to happen here again? So, but before they could really even get into all of that, there's the whole thing with Anthony, because he was wandering through the woods and like something was hurting his head and made him like dizzy. Obviously the initial thing is like, oh, it's just your allergies, but they told that story about that guy apparently got super drunk and then basically axed everyone to death. I was almost hoping it would be a true story, because I thought like, oh, the thing that affected Anthony was going to make him go crazy like that. I thought that's where it was going to go. I even love like Annabelle leaning into referencing all like the horror stuff. She's like, oh, this is very like Blair Witch. Even to the point that the lady researcher who was she was recording stuff out there on her camera, it's like, oh yeah, cool, even more Blair Witch style. But she's referencing like all these different horror movies, which I forgot was like either Nathan or Anthony were like, or maybe even Naomi were like, didn't everyone die in those movies? Yeah, and she also says like she hopes like, oh, this is the sequel. She's like, well, we all know that the originals are gorier or whatever. And I'm like, it was more like the body counts are higher. I'm like, I'm wondering in retrospect, I'm like, I wonder, is that typically true that like the originals, I feel like you would think, because the whole mentality behind a movie, and you know, maybe this is referencing older horror movies and stuff, but I think the mentality for most movies is go bigger and bigger in the sequel, you know, which can be a good, which can be a bad sometimes, I'm sure, but so you think a body count would be way higher, but once again, maybe that's a more like horror thing now. Maybe that wasn't always the case in the past. I don't know. Or maybe she was just trying to like justify, like, no, we're going to be okay. If it's a sequel, there won't be as much like death and carnage. Whatever the case may be, I went on a whole tangent. But like I said, I thought it was interesting that it ended up being like, oh, like that story at the camp was just that, a story. It was meant to like scare people away and keep them away from looking too deeply into all this stuff, which the deeper everyone looked into it, obviously they found the blue substance, found out what this researcher was looking into. apparently it's like, what does it all have to do with a plant or something? Or like, because her research, because eventually there was like that deeper level, like a room of some sort that was like what was it? They dug up and made like a room in a particular area, but it's like, yeah, what does that have to do with like her studying these plants or whatever? And so basically we see her get attacked in the woods by someone. It's like, right, it must be one of the camp counselors because it was someone that she knew. But Nathan and Annabelle like wanted to back away, and so did Naomi. And so Anthony felt like, oh, I guess I'm just in this by myself. I thought we were in this together. But Naomi was coming from a place of fear, you know, because she was scared. It's like, right, like, because she kept trying to get Annabelle to like say like, right, so it was a good thing we didn't get involved. It's like, she's like, wait, don't you agree with me? It's like, well, you want me to agree with you. It's like, yeah, it might be dangerous for me, Anthony, or Nathan, but not you with your powers. But it's because her powers didn't kick in last time and she was scared, like, what if something goes wrong this time? And, you know, Annabelle reminds her, like, you know, the only thing to fear is fear itself, because listening to Dee, that basically there was only two ways to face your fear, was basically to fight it or to face it. And so she decided to face it, and she continued investigating, ends up running into Anthony, and they end up finding the material ends up being these glowing blue rocks, which are like, once again, when you got glowing rocks, your mind immediately thinks, oh, kryptonite, but it's not. But maybe it's something meant to be like equivalency to kryptonite, but I'm curious, is it meant to be like human exterminating type of rock? Because it seems like it doesn't affect aliens, but it affects humans, because the moment it started affecting Anthony and it did affect Naomi, it's like, okay, so it's maybe it's whatever they're researching is meant to kill humans. Like, who knows what they're really up to. But he kind of reveals himself, one of the counselors reveals himself to be an alien. And luckily Naomi was able to fend him off, but he ended up getting away in the end. So they ended up calling the authorities, and like how much of that like really got dealt with, we never really get a complete and conclusive answer to. But the question is like, well, how much did Anthony see? He's like, yeah, I was kind of in and out of it. I heard loud voices and stuff, but you know, by the time I woke, like kind of came to, it was like, it was all over and stuff. So it's like, cool, he didn't see my powers and stuff. Because obviously there's the conversation about with Nathan as well. Well, Annabelle talked to both Nathan and Naomi about things, that it's like, yeah, Naomi can't talk to him about everything, but she can talk to him about some things. And so she opened up about why she was like broke up with him. It's because she was scared of getting hurt, which I think that's the most natural reaction of just like, yeah, you're just scared of like putting your heart out there and for it to, you know, not work out. Sadly, relationships don't always work out. That is kind of the rub of it, but it's like, you know, it's better to have loved than lost than never have loved at all, you know, that whole thing. So, but despite being afraid, because even she still admits that she is afraid, but she's more afraid of not trying, you know, and that was something, you know, Dee had pointed, that's why she kissed Nathan last episode, was because like, right, Dee had convinced her, like, when you find something, you hold on to it and you don't let go. So she is, despite her fears, trying. So it isn't just going to be like the fun stuff. It's going to be like, right, we're going to give this a serious try as a relationship. So catching a tiny glimpse of the next episode, seems like this whole love triangle thing between her and Anthony and Nathan, well, it's going to be interesting to see how Lourdes handles it. I think Lourdes will be chill about it. It's like, oh, it's kind of a bummer, but I still like you as a person, so it's not going to be an issue. But Anthony definitely has his... But also, like, Anthony and... On top of everything, Anthony and... Nathan already had that, oh, townie versus... military kid thing going on. It's kind of died down a little bit, but obviously, like, when Nathan was pissed at him, he was like, townie. Like, he it's still there. That venom is still there. It's just like, I think a lot of the stuff with Naomi kind of like is bubbling it to the surface, while also it kept it cool for a while because she was in the process of deciding, and now she made a decision, it's going to cause some issues amongst that group. So we'll see how that ends up playing out next episode, but still. Like I said, it's just interesting that Naomi has a way of finding herself drawn to all of this stuff. Because she was just going to camp just to be normal, and it's like, yep, this world, the alien stuff still managed to find you. But, because there was also writing from the disc on the thing, too. So I'm like, what is the correlation there? What is this about? Cause once again, like, we're getting so many, I think this is so interesting as a superhero property, because I think it's doing something really different, because it is first and foremost kind of like a mystery, with like some superpowered stuff mixed in. Like, there's mystery elements in other shows to some extent, but not like this. It's like, there's pieces to a puzzle that you're kind of like trying to piece together and figure out, you know? There's something here that she's getting the pieces to a larger puzzle. And I'm wondering, does this have any correlation to like Zambado and the 29, or is this kind of a separate thing in itself? We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.